Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Arren Kimbel Sannit. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Capitol Times here in Phoenix, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate of the House and Senate races in Arizona's 6th legislative district. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend rather. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and House are participating in tonight's debate. As the moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents if they so have them here tonight. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from myself as a reporter and from the voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state soliciting questions for the candidates. Voters are welcome to continue submitting questions live if they are watching this debate at email or via email at debates@kc-a.com, via text at 928-362-1062, or on the phone at 480-937-1297. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for all candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, personal attacks, etc. This debate is scheduled for around an hour, so we may not get to all of those audience questions, but we will do our best. For our candidates here, you have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. So if you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit those responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is supposed to be a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal, above all, is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. With us here this evening, we have candidates for the House and Senate races in Arizona's LD6. We have Democratic Senate candidate Felicia French, a military veteran. She is running against Wendy Rogers, who was not able to attend. She's a Republican. On the House side, we have Flagstaff Mayor Coral Evans running as a Democrat, and Art Babbott, a former Flagstaff City Council member and Coconino County Supervisor, running as an independent. Neither of their Republican opponents, the incumbent Representative Walter Blackman or former lawmaker Brenda Barton, were able to attend. All right, now that we have all that out of the way, I will invite you guys to give your opening statements. We will start in alphabetical order by last name, so we'll go to our independent first. Art, please take it away.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity. Tonight's a big deal because tomorrow we start our process of choosing representatives for our constitutional republic. So functional politics is about getting together, creating opportunities, and solving problems. Dysfunctional politics is what we see around us day in and day out. Dysfunctional politics is characterized by mountains of dark money. It is characterized by hyper-partisan grenade lobbing. It is characterized by folks who don't always remember who pays their salary. We continue to see our politics using the same formula with the same cast of characters, and we expect different results. We are all here tonight. I got two colleagues who I know a little bit personally, very much professionally, who I respect, but I'm the only one out of this crew who has gone to every single debate. When those on the right side of the aisle ask me to go, I go. When those who are on the left or the Democratic side, I go. The problem is we are not engaging across this party lines for conversations. As an independent, I don't want to just occasionally reach across the aisle. I want to stand in the aisle. I want to be opportunistic and understand sometimes those good ideas come from the right side, sometimes they come from the left side. I have 15 years building better government in city and county government. I have a quarter century building successful small businesses. I'm looking for the opportunity to build a better Arizona, and I'm going to do that by taking and building a different box. The box we are doing and using is not producing outcomes we can be proud of. As an independent, I get to take a different set of risks, and I get to take a different set of approaches to conversations. Super happy to be here. Appreciate the conversation, and thanks for helping moderate this.
Great. Thanks, Art. All right, Mayor Evans, it is now to you. Your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Coral Evans, and my family has lived in Arizona for over 4 generations. My grandfather moved from McNary, Arizona to Flagstaff, Arizona, because he could make 3 cents more an hour at the sawmill there. I grew up in public housing, and I got my first job when I was 13. I'm very proud of the fact that I currently live in a house that my grandfather built in 1942. In addition to serving on the Flagstaff City Council, I also run a nonprofit, and we oversee a small business incubator. We believe that addressing generational poverty comes through the creation of small businesses. I also own a small business. I have an MBA and an undergraduate in business management. I believe as an elected official, I represent everyone. I represent those who voted for me, those who did not vote for me, and those who could not vote for me. For example, children under the age of 18. When someone calls me up and says, Mayor Coral, there's a pothole in front of my house, I don't ask them if that pothole is Democratic, Republican, Independent, or Green. I ask them where the address is because we need to get the pothole fixed. I've had the honor of serving in local government since 2008. I've seen people come together to support each other, our schools, our churches, and to grow homegrown solutions to address local issues. Together, we've brought a veterans home to Northern Arizona, helped incubate small businesses, and expanded library hours. I've also seen Arizona's education fall to 49th in the nation. I've seen small business owners really struggle to fight huge obstacles to try to make sure that their dream comes to reality. And I've seen our state representatives pass legislation that prevents communities from solving their own problems. That's why I am running for the Arizona State House. Our families deserve quality schools. Our small businesses need support to help them grow and thrive. And our cities and towns need the freedom to make their own decisions. I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you. Clean elections.
Thank you, Mayor Evans. And now, finally, in the upper chamber, we have Felicia French. Please, with your opening statement, go ahead.
Yes, Arren, thank you very much for this invite and clean elections, and I'm really pleased to be here with Art and Carl. And by the way, if I was invited by the Republicans, I would be there. I just never was invited to do a debate, so I hope that they do. I'm Felicia French. I'm the state Senate candidate for Arizona's Legislative District 6. I'm a nurse and a retired colonel, and I'm also a proud single mom. During my 32 years of military service in the U.S. Army and the Arizona Army National Guard, I rose from private to colonel, from medic to medical commander. I was a medevac helicopter pilot, a senior medical advisor, and an equal employment officer. After the military, I became a sustainability scientist and an educator at ASU and Mesa Community College. Since retiring, I spent much of my time volunteering. I've served with groups like AmeriCares and the Sierra Club, as well as my local community emergency response team here in Pine, where I've been home here for about 19 years. This summer, I volunteered for a month in Tuba City on the Navajo Nation, supporting their COVID-19 efforts. So that's a little bit about my background. In terms of my values, I'm running for state senate first and foremost because as an educator and a mom, I know that no matter where a child lives, they deserve to attend a great public school. Fully funded public education has to be our top priority if we were to give our kids the tools they need to succeed. It's really long past time to pull Arizona out of the bottom ranking for almost every educational measure. After education, my next priorities are healthcare and local control. Because as a nurse, I want everyone, especially people in rural communities, including our tribal nations, to have access to both quality preventative care and affordable medical treatment. Third, I'm running as a rural resident. What matters in my district is different than what matters in Maricopa. So I want to strengthen local control, and at the same time, I want to make our state government more accountable to Northern Arizona. And again, thank you for this opportunity to present our views.
Great, thank you. All right, I'd like to start these things with a little bit of sort of news of the day or of the week and kind of get your guys' response. Last night, I believe, there was a big surprise when a district court judge in Arizona extended our voter registration deadline as a result of a lawsuit from Mi Familia Vota. Lots of controversy around that decision, with some conservatives saying it comes too late, it creates a burden for county elections officials, with Democrats saying that this is the only way that we can get folks registered in a time when COVID has obviously been a huge obstacle in people's lives. So I'd like to hear from you guys to get a sense of whether you think that this was the right decision for this judge to make, whether you think that it's fair to extend our voter registration deadline despite not a lot of notice to county elections officials, or whether we should have taken a different path. We'll stick with our alphabetical order for now, so we'll go to Art with that question first.
Great. So I was super happy to hear that ruling last night. As a nation and as a state, we need to do more to engender participation in our constitutional republic and our democratic process. Accessible voter registration should be just part and parcel of doing that. We shouldn't, this should not only be a ruling that stands for this particular COVID-related time, but it should also serve to help inform going forward. We should allow people to register to vote way up until the election. And so long as the recorders are involved in understanding what that is, I do understand from a practical perspective, this could be tough for recorders, but it's the right decision to do. And I hope it lives well beyond that. You know, one of the things that I just really care deeply about is reforming an electoral system that has built a box which has produced some pretty predictable outcomes. And those are outcomes that I think too often aren't serving the interests of our communities. I believe very strongly in campaign finance reform. Dark money is literally drowning in both parties. They take dark money and they use dark money for their candidates. That is something that I think over and over citizens have asked for some accountability on how dark money influences the people who then go to vote on the bills who ended up receiving those contributions. The other piece that I take huge pride in being a leader in the state is electoral reform and moving forward with ranked choice voting opportunities and different structural elements that would allow for us to get away from this hyper-partisan, polarized political environment. Ranked choice voting has that ability to make us do what we used to do, speak to broad constituencies, build coalitions, understanding that majority 50% plus one is what the requirement should be in order for you to serve. So the great news is the citizens are leading us like they do so many times. Alaska, Massachusetts, Maine, Santa Fe, cities in Utah are all moving forward because they are responding to the needs of the citizens. The ruling that the judge did is just a small example of we need to be proactive and forward-thinking and engaging our democratic process and constitutional republic.
Got it. And I do want to say just real quick so our viewers know that ruling has been appealed, so that may not hold, but holding for the time being. So just don't want anybody to get ahead of themselves.
Who did the appeal on it?
It was the RNC, I believe, as like an I forgot what the word is, an intervener. Okay. But don't quote me on that. We'll now go to Mayor Evans. First, if you can comment on the judge's ruling, and if you also want to talk a little bit about some of, if you have elections reform legislation that you want to bring to the table. We heard a lot of proposals from Mr. Babbott. What do you think about some of the things he said, and what can you bring to the table for voters?
So first of all, I was very excited to hear that we are going to make sure that people have the ability to vote, not only in this election, but moving forward. You know, this is something that we settled generations ago here in our country. I know that when myself and my twin brother turned 18, I have a twin brother who's 4 minutes older than me. My mom put us in the car and she drove us down to the MVD to register to vote. And when my daughter turned 18, we sat in front of the computer and I made sure that she was registered to vote. You know, access to voting is something that's absolutely critical. And I actually think we should allow same day voter registration, right? The same day of the election. You know, here in the state of Arizona, we have, as representatives who currently serve us, they have done a lot to preempt individuals' ability to vote, as well as preempt cities and towns from understanding where money comes from in their elections. You know, one of the things that I am passionate about as a mayor is local control, and the fact that locally we know what's best for our cities and towns. You know, what's good for the city of Phoenix is not good for the city of Flagstaff, is different from what Payson might want, as well as what a Snowflake might need. One of the things that they did was in 2018, the citizens of Tempe decided they wanted to know where money was coming from in their local elections. So 91% of them voted for election reform. They were promptly preempted by representatives down at the state of Arizona. I am looking forward to being a state representative and making sure that local control is restored to cities and towns so they can govern themselves as they see fit.
Got it. And now, Ms. French, your thoughts on the judge's ruling on elections reform writ large?
Yeah, I thought it was good news. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy, and it's a fundamental right that people have fought to protect, to include myself. All of us should have the freedom to choose our leaders and make our voices heard. Our democracy works best when everyone participates. So yes, I'm very happy about it. In addition to that, I strongly believe that vote by mail, we need to, and that all the ballot drop off and all that needs to be done. We need more ballot drop-offs, those things. I also believe we should have the election day should be a holiday, so that we encourage people to show it's symbolic that how important a day it is, as well as that everyone has a chance to vote then. So anything we can do to encourage people to vote, I think we should, because once again, it's the cornerstone of a democracy to get everyone out there to vote. I don't know why anybody be afraid to have people to vote, because whether they vote for you or not, it's you want to know what your constituents feel, and voting is one of the ways they show you.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of preemption. I think both Art and Mayor Evans, you guys brought it up specifically, and this is something that I think we've seen in Flagstaff before, as a city that is frequently out of step with the state legislature on issues like the minimum wage, for example. The budget last year included this provision potentially requiring Flagstaff to pay the salaries of state employees because of the differing minimum wage levels. How do you navigate? No matter who controls the legislature, or no matter who controls the House, rather, there's still a possibility of a Republican majority in the Senate and certainly the governor's office. How do you navigate, for your district's residents, local control issues like this, and kind of more broadly, the kind of reforms that Republicans may not be into? I mean, how do you kind of sell them on stuff like that? And there we'll start with Mayor Evans, because obviously you know this issue pretty well.
Oh, well, thank you for that question. As someone from Arizona, I understand the importance of local control and the importance of residents determining what works for themselves. I'm from Arizona, and I am the mayor of a small town. I think one of the issues are representatives that are down at the state have never been servant leaders. So they've never had the opportunity to serve locally. They have not served as mayors, as council members, or on school boards. Since they have been in office, they have continuously stripped away local control. And they've even gone so far as to make sure that communities would be punished if they had an idea that was out of step. So for example, preemptions from the state right now include cities and towns' ability to collect their own state sales tax. Where cities and towns used to be able to collect that has been preempted by the state. Right now, the state currently collects all the sales tax and then charges the cities and towns in order to get their money. The Airbnb short-term rental issue is something that has created major housing shortages all over northern Arizona. This is the #1 issue of the Greater Arizona Mayors Association, of which I was chair and I'm now currently chair. There's a preemption on single-use plastics, a preemption on finance reform. It just goes on. Local control needs to be given back to local communities so they can govern themselves. So very specifically, SB 1350, that has to do with short-term rentals, and SB 1487, which takes away money from cities and towns who attempt to address issues at a local level. They need to be rescinded. Now, as a third-generation daughter of Arizona, I can tell you that in rural Arizona, we do not like big government. We like to take care of our own problems. If we need to talk to Big Brother, we will give Big Brother a call. But we really know what works for our cities and our towns. So, local control is an issue. And I think really when you talk to people and you explain that, people do listen. When you find out that, hey, it's a hardship not to be able to know where money comes from in your elections, not to be able to address single-use plastics, not to be able to do things that citizens need.
Art, I want to kick this to you now, just because we'll stick within each chamber. On the issue of local control, do you think that repealing something like 1487, which allows lawmakers to essentially accuse city governments of violating the Constitution at will. Do you think that repealing 1487 and in general reining in on some of the states' limits on local control is the right method of getting things like Airbnb or short-term rentals reform passed?
Yeah, so I think that is a piece of the conversation. I don't think there is one formula that you can pass through a variety of policy topics that say this is the formula to ensure local control. Local control comes with local responsibility, and that responsibility rests in the foundational relationship that the mayor just talked about, which is those who are closest to the citizens we serve have the strongest relationships. And we understand our communities infinitely better than those who are far away. I mean, one of the most ironic things that we see year in, and one of our retiring state legislators was just famous for this. He would turn and rail on the overreach of the federal government, and the federal government is coming to crush us down, and then turn around and do the exact same thing to local communities. And people understand the disconnect with that. But the mayor referenced short-term rentals. That was the classic and the poster child for what happens when a bunch of folks get together down in Phoenix and don't think of the impacts to real world Arizona. That was a mistake that doesn't just impact our workforce housing, it impacts our quality of life just immensely. And so those are important pieces. We didn't get that right size. I want to talk about, just really briefly to help contextualize, we've done a good job on some of the local control issues around school reopenings, for example. Governing boards have had that authority to be relational to the people they serve, the families, the kids they serve, and have that conversation. There are no easy answers with local control. There is a tension between having a patchwork of laws and having consistency. That's one of the challenges. But I think if you have legislators who are embedded in local government, I think that's one of the issues. Too many legislators have never had experience building relationships, balancing budgets, having difficult constituent conversations that you get to flesh this out. So, the mayor who I am privileged to be in the same race in has local experience. I have local experience. I think that's really, really important, even if we don't agree on all topics or strategies on how we have it. It's just really important.
Mm-hmm. And Miss French, rather, I will put this to you a slightly different way. When you get to if you get to the Senate, and you're in a position where you have a Republican majority, and I imagine you are in support of local control and would echo many of the positions as your two friends here, how do you convince Republicans who, as Mr. Babbott pointed out, have for years been complaining about federal overreach and then been clamping down on local independence? How do you convince some of those same lawmakers that you need to bring some of that control back to, whether that's the city of Flagstaff or the city of Snowflake or what have you?
Well, first we need to remember that those local people were elected by the people. They're the people's will. They elected them, so they know what they want, and they're like Mayor Coral Evans was elected by the people of Flagstaff, so she's speaking for them. She's representing them, and I know it's been said that they're rogue people doing it. It's not. You're exercising the will of the people through the election process. It's kind of ironic that about 5 years ago, I did go to the state legislature, and I remember the individual artist talking about was just lambasting the fact that the federal government was telling the states what to do, and it's all their fault. They can't be telling the states what to do. Yet this same individual is the same as person that's saying that the cities, the mayors should not be telling the state what to do. So it's just kind of funny. The other thing is that when I 2 years ago, when I was running for state house, I actually visited all 36 towns and cities in our district, and every single one of them has unique issues. And this is a rural area, and every one of them is unique. Cottonwood has the wine issues there. Holbrook area, they have the fracking issues. And Flagstaff has a short-term rental. So does Sedona. Even Pine now we have short-term rental issues. So, and the water issues are slightly different in each place. So yes, everyone has different issues. So we shouldn't be having a state in Phoenix telling us what we need to do in our rural area.
What are some issues that? Sorry, Art, go ahead.
Nope.
No, were you saying something? Oh, sorry.
That was done.
Well, what are some issues that folks down here in Phoenix might not know about yet that are kind of being talked about around the digital watering holes in northern Arizona? You know, I think about the Tonto Creek Bridge issue out in Pinal County this year. I think a lot of folks in Phoenix were not super aware that that was an issue, even though folks in that area have been ringing the bell about that for a long time. So what are some of those local issues that you're hearing about as you talk to these local constituents that Phoenix and the capital has not caught up to yet? Well, we'll stick with you, Felicia, for now.
Yeah, the issues are that, like, for example, the bridge, washing out of the bridge. Our roads here are worse because we do get the extremes in weather with the snow and the heat. So our roads aren't as good because when we have extreme weather conditions, unlike Phoenix, it's just hot, hot. And so the difference, you don't have the potholes as much as you do have here when the freezing and contracting, which causes potholes. So those are issues. Our bridges, we have flash floods. And the Tonto Bridge that you're referring to, I believe that in Gila County, is one that, we had several children were lost in that last year around this time, around November after Thanksgiving, because we didn't have that bridge in place. So that's a huge problem. Just being able to get to the grocery store can be life threatening, and some people have no access to it. The digital divide is a huge problem here in the rural area. 22% roughly of Arizonans don't have access to internet or have computers. So, and that's mostly in our rural area. So that digital divide affects our education, affects our healthcare, and affects our businesses.
Mm.
So those are things that people in Phoenix don't really have that same problem.
One of the local issue that I wanted to touch on, not necessarily exclusive to Flagstaff, but lots of relatively arid mountainous regions across the country are being consumed with fire. Flagstaff has had its own fire issues in the past couple of years. Northern Arizona in general, Arizona in general has had fire issues. Whether you attribute that to man-made climate change or to poor forest management or to some combination thereof, what can you do at the state legislature to try to steer our state's climate future in a more positive and less destructive direction? We'll go to Mayor Evans for this one at this point.
Thank you for that question. Definitely, northern Arizona. There was fires over in Tonto National, the national forest there. Water is a major issue as well. Here in the city of Flagstaff, we are very proud to say that we did the state's first climate action and adaptation plan. Very specifically, we said that we need to get a handle on this, and we need to understand first how to respond to the current changes in our climate, and then how to make sure that we can move forward in a way that's successful. The state of Arizona needs the same such plan. The state of Arizona needs to understand that now down in the valley area, you have, 60 plus days of 115-degree weather. I'm from Arizona. I know that that is very unusual. Here it was 100 degrees in Pine Top. It was 100 degrees in Pine Top. It was 96 degrees in Flagstaff. You go down to Cottonwood and Camp Verde, and there's issues with water. It doesn't snow like it used to snow. So one, we need to accept the fact that science is real, and you don't have to be a scientist to understand that things are now different. And one of the things here in northern Arizona, we rely on our climate. We rely heavily on our climate as an economic driver, not only for tourism, but for all the business that it creates. And so protecting our forests, protecting our water, protecting our dark skies is something that is absolutely critical, and something that the state of Arizona should be out ahead of and in front of. We need to have a rural water policy conversation and a plan for that. We need to better understand, okay, now the climate is changing, how do we address that? The citizens of Flagstaff actually took out a bond in 2014 to go onto state trust land and manage their forest for them to protect our water supply. Why is the state not managing its own property correctly? And how can we then turn that management of that resource, that wood, into jobs? Like I said, my grandfather was a lumberjack, right? So then how do we do that to make sure that our economy can move forward? As our nation moves toward clean energy, what does that look like? And how can we make sure that the people who are currently in those jobs that we know are going to be phased out, how do we make sure that they've been retrained? and that they have the opportunity to be involved in and part of the economy moving forward in a different way. So I have several ideas that we could spend all night talking about, but we have done it here in Flagstaff. We have been very clear about it, and I look forward to bringing those ideas and those practical solutions. You know, the city of Sedona is following our lead on the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. Clarkdale is looking at something like this. Been down to Prescott Valley and Prescott talking about this. It's absolutely critical that we protect our resource because truly several jobs in Northern Arizona, the entire region, depend on the beauty that we have here.
Mhm. And I mean, just talking about the energy sector in general, obviously is important to Northern Arizona, not necessarily in the Flagstaff area, but you look at something like the NGS plant. Obviously, there's an intersection with the climate change and job development there. Art, I want to now kick this to you. I'm hoping that we can all here agree that man-made climate change is an issue and that this is something that we should be moving towards. But how do you, at the legislative level, as opposed to the federal or local level, actually steer the state in a different direction? What are some concrete policies that you would bring to the table to help with things like wildfires and water management? And can you create some jobs while you're doing it?
Mhm. So there is I am kind of this mix of someone who's kind of stubborn on one side, but then just incredibly optimistic on the other side. And this really goes to the core of where a lot of my optimism lies. And when kind of magic happens and good things happen, when we get together in a political conversation to solve problems, it's great when that happens with a diverse set of interests that you are serving. You are describing one of those just amazing, amazing opportunities. In Northern Arizona, NGS has closed. Cholla and Coronado coal-fired plants are all going to be closed in the next decade to a couple decades. That is going to free up thousands of megawatts of capacity in the transmission and distribution system that feeds not only the state of Arizona, but also the Southwest. Those WAPA lines, which are part of the utility distribution, arterial and veins across this country, need to be filled with new energy sources. That distributed utility and photovoltaic, some wind, some biomass, is that great opportunity. It serves our climate objectives. It serves our economic diversification objectives. It serves protecting large landscape scale land holdings. We are filled in Northern Arizona and Coconino County. We have 1,000,000-acre ranches here. We have 600,000-acre ranches, and they are under threat. Climate change, the reality of drought, and just the reality of the pressures of large rangeland management operations, and given the climate and drought we're in, is really threatened. That renewable energy opportunity serves possibly diversifying their economic base so they can stay together and those aren't split up into 40-acre 40-acre wildcat lots. It serves our economy, and it serves our climate objectives. The mayor referenced our restoration piece. I have played a leadership role in forest restoration for years up here. One of the most important things we can do, and is being done, is connecting the watersheds that serve the southern part of the state to the forest health that is in the northern part of the state. They are intimately connected. You cannot separate the health of the Verde River, the Verde watersheds, from our forest restoration efforts. And so those are those areas where you have people, magic happens when people who shouldn't be in the same room are sitting in the same room working to solve a problem. That's when great things happen. And that's where personally, I think some of my best work, when I bring those people together to have a conversation, to look at the opportunity side of challenge. The last thing I do want to say about water is water is a local and regional control issue. HB 2896, which is the rural water bill that was introduced this last year, is a great start to understand one size fits all doesn't work. The issues that our watersheds face are distinct and different from what Mojave County, from La Paz County, from Cochise County is facing. We need to provide tools and reasonable management strategies that allow communities to manage the long-term viability of their watersheds, with tools that are relational to the issues that they're facing.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. French, we actually have a climate question that is directed specifically at you because of your through hike of the Arizona Trail. This voter would like to know what you saw on the trail that would suggest to you Arizona's environmental problems, and what you would propose at the legislature to address some of those problems. So, kind of touched on some of those subjects already, but how would you answer that?
Uh, on the trail, I saw, which happens, by the way, the Arizona Trail is 800 miles and it covers the entire district. A third of the trail itself covers the entire LD6 district. So I was able to see firsthand water issues, the drought that we've all been talking about, power lines and the humming of it, and the loss of energy. 5% of energy is lost on those transmission lines, and reclamation of mines. We had all kinds of mines along the way that we had to get rerouted because of the reclamation of them. And these, almost every one of these mines were not even American mines; they were foreign-owned mines, and the tailings from them are very toxic to our water system and our land. So now the taxpayers had to bear the burden, billions of dollars, to clean up these mine tailings that could affect our water supply, our groundwater. And just outside of Tucson, outside of on the Gila River, and all the way up, there was mine tailings to different locations that we have to, as taxpayers, have to clean up because the companies that went defunct or went under that were doing them, and they're not held accountable for the cleanup of that. And if you really to add salt to the wound, the amount of money that they derived from those mines, whatever they were mining, wasn't even nearly as much as it cost to clean up. So now here we have to clean it up. So that was a huge issue that we need to look at when as legislators, and who we allow to mine, and making sure there's a plan to clean up and all that. And again, the power issues, the power lines are very vulnerable and they cause fires. Look what happened in Paradise, California. That power lines created a fire, killed 80 something people. And again, on top of that, it loses 5% of its energy along the transmission of it, which is billions of dollars of energy wasted. So there's so many things we can do better at the state legislature. And one of the things I would like to see, and I think how I can convince the state legislature when we get there, are people from outside that aren't in the rural area, is talk to them about, hey, you lived in Phoenix last year or this year. How many days was it over 100? Do you ever remember it being over 110 degrees that many days in a row? Unprecedented. So it creates an urban heat island effect. The city gets warmer, the surrounding area, the pavement, the concrete, it's all dark surfaces, are absorbed by the heat throughout the day, and our nights stay longer. I grew up in Phoenix as a child in the 60s. Our nights, they cooled off at night. You didn't have that absorbed heat staying there, which is very problematic. So some of the things I'd like to see do is start switching to renewable energy. And it would solve three problems. It would save money, it would create local jobs that can't be outsourced, and reduce the heat in our cities. And how do we do that? Is by converting all our existing buildings, our government buildings, to more sustainable buildings, retrofitting them to weatherize them, putting solar panels, making carports out of solar panels, all of our parking lots, solar. And these panels will reduce the operating costs for our government by cutting utility bills. They will also create clean energy jobs, and they'll also keep the temperatures down. Our AC units won't have to be running, which also heats up the air. And even in your car, when you get into your car, if you have it covered, you don't have to use as much gas to cool off your car there as well. So this is all a positive feedback loop. Right now, we're stuck in the past. We're trying to rely on coal, nuclear, and hydroelectric, which all of these increase carbon emissions except the hydroelectric. However, it does in the fact that all that cement to make those dams, but it uses millions of gallons of water in these energy systems that we can't afford here in Arizona. With Arizona being the second sunniest state in the nation, it's ludicrous that we're not relying more on solar, and so that we can have clean air, clean water, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue. And I'll remind them that it creates a lot of jobs, and it lowers our taxes, and it really addresses the realities of climate change.
So let me ask one follow-up. You kind of framed this as a rural versus an urban issue, or both rural and urban issue. But Arizona's rural representation in the legislature is overwhelmingly, and has been overwhelmingly, Republican, not necessarily in the heart of the urban heat island in Phoenix. I would imagine that those people are probably a little bit more sensitive to climate change, if anything, the inner Phoenix representation. So what are the current rural representatives and senators of our state not understanding, or why, if they are sensitive to these things that you saw on the Arizona Trail, are they not doing something about it? I mean, I'm not hearing these suggestions from everybody who is running for office.
My guess is they're putting profit before people. The businesses, the corporations, they're putting them before the greater good of the people. Like in the Holbrook Basin up there in the northeastern Arizona, right now they're fracking. They're trying to get fracking going, which could jeopardize our water supply for the 40 million people, actually, because that water supply goes to the Colorado River, and of course California uses it, we use it, Nevada uses it, that water. So they're looking at the corporations and the profit versus the greater good of their own constituent and their own selves, because they live in those areas. Some of them actually live in the district, and they have to drink that water.
Right.
Arren?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I follow up on the question just quickly?
Keep it
So-
brief.
Okay, so I would argue that all the topics we talk about come under the umbrella of either a functional or a dysfunctional electoral system in a box that we built. So that box penalizes any risk taking. It penalizes, I shouldn't say any, much risk taking when you are trying to move out of what your party position is. And so there is a great example with when you have a more functional, competitive, majority-based electoral system, you are not governing from the extremes. You are tending to govern from the middle. You are governing from people who are willing to show up, to give something, to get something. And we've all seen on the left where you're out-primaried from the left, and on the right, you're out-primaried from the right because we have an electoral box that rewards that. Things like ranked choice voting allows for competition, diversity of opinions, coalition building, and creating larger constituencies. I think a lot of it comes back to how we are having our elections.
I want to add to that too, to the whole conversation, because I also think there's a nuance that we are perhaps missing here. You know, when we sat down as a city and we went out to do our climate action and adaptation plan, we made sure that everybody was included. You know, there is a real issue with climate migration and people who are being gentrified out of areas because of climate. When you look at what's happening up here in this region, I think that people are afraid. You know, we had a power plant close. Those individuals had good jobs. Those jobs allowed them to support 10, 15. There was one incident where there was one individual supporting 20 people in their family off of that job. These are individuals that may or may not have gone to college, and they probably didn't want to leave their area. And so when we talk about climate change and we talk about the new jobs and the new this and new that, I think what we need to do as representatives is we need to make sure that we are including them in the conversation and that they know they are not going to be left behind as we move into this new world. One of the things I sat down and I talked to some individuals about the closures that are getting ready to happen. We know they're coming. I was like, okay, right now in the state of Arizona, we need welders, we need electricians, we need carpenters, we need tradesmen, right? Tradesmen and women. So as we know, some of these plants are going to close. Can we go into these plants? Can we identify people and match them up with maybe a trade that they're excited about? And while they're going to work, can we carve out 2 hours a day where they're maybe working on their apprenticeship? So when this plant closes and they close the door and they get that one shot at that severance, they also walk out with a journeyman welder certificate. Or maybe now they can like go and install the solar panels. Maybe now they can go and lay the heavy concrete. I think part of the conversation is that we are not talking to the people who need the work and need the jobs, right? And we just are talking about this is the new norm. And some people don't see themselves in that. So as we move forward as a state, and as we seek to represent everybody, we need to make sure that we bring everybody into the conversation at that very base root level.
Great, thank you. If we're done on this subject, I want to move on to a couple more things before we wrap up. We've had several voters, Art, want to ask you specifically due to the fact that you were registered as a Democrat in the past and that you had previously endorsed a Democratic candidate, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats candidate for president, Bernie Sanders, in 2016, what, I guess, sort of personal political transformation you have undergone, and what party you will caucus with if elected?
So, I first got elected in 2002 to local government. And I will say, the person and the man that I am today is different than that person. I believe I've matured a lot, and mature doesn't mean I go to the right side or the left side. I think I have become more focused on being a problem solver. I think I understand, as I do in my businesses, how to build successful conversations. Over my political career, I've realized, for me, that is the most important place I can be. And that's where I'm best served to be. I do not govern from the extremes. I govern from the middle. And I clearly recognize that good ideas sometimes come from this side, and then sometimes they come from that side. So let's get to the caucus point. I always kind of base my position not just on where I may go, but what is the risk of continuing to do what we're doing. And that's actually kind of part of the foundation of reason why I'm an independent, and why I am taking the political risk to stand in this aisle. Because to me, the risk of continuing to do what we do and how we continue to have our dysfunctional political conversation pales in comparison. I should say the opposite. It is much more painful to do that than to try something different. And so with that said, caucusing, I look at what we have. We have a Speaker of the House. The Republicans have been in charge for 10 years. We have a Speaker of the House that in 2019, I'm going to put some rough numbers out to you, about 1,400 bills came out of the Arizona legislature. As far as I can tell with the best accuracy, less than 1% of those that made it to the House, the Committee of the Whole and moved forward originated from the other party. That is a recipe for all or nothing dysfunctional politics. They have stated over and over that that is how they have chosen to govern. As an independent, I hope to use that fulcrum by being in a closely divided House to make sure that that does not continue. The Democrats have indicated that they will not pursue that same type of transactional, suffocating, legislative vindictiveness that is producing what we're doing. That is where I am. That's where I want to be. That's what I want to use my political capital to support. And it's a great question. It's a fair question. And I am going to be the smartest, most strategic person. I know what we've had for 10 years. I know that there is no conversation across the aisle. That is unacceptable. The people who pay our salaries deserve us to not base the merit of an idea based on the party that originated it. Its merit should be based on, does it solve a problem? Does it create an opportunity? Does it make our communities vibrant and vital? And that's where I sit. I will tell you, Speaker Bowers does not share any philosophical approach to governing from the middle that I see.
Great. I appreciate you answering that question. I want to move on to ESAs real quick. I have a couple of voter questions about that. Just going to ask you simply what your stance is on ESAs and voucher expansion, whether you agree with some of the legislation that Republicans have passed to allow students in certain schools out of state to use voucher money, and whether you think we should rein in ESAs moving forward. We'll start with Ms. French on this question.
Yes, I don't disagree with the original intent and design of the ESAs. ESAs were supposed to help students with learning disabilities and learning challenges. But the truth is, the formula for how these students and who needs extra support, the funding has not been adjusted for over 40 years. The ESAs that now exist don't actually effectively serve these students. And unfortunately, private charter schools are not required to support or even admit students with learning disabilities. That's because our legislators don't hold private charter schools to the same oversight standards and requirements our public schools are held to. So even though public school funding is diverted to private for-profit charter schools, students with special needs aren't guaranteed to benefit.
Mm-hmm. And Mayor Evans, obviously you haven't dealt with this on the legislative level quite But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think that we should be reining in ESA expansion? If that's something that should be part of the Democratic platform, if you guys are in the majority?
So my daughter went to public schools, and she has a disability. So I understand this issue very well. I think the original intent was probably great, but I don't think that they are working the way they were intended to be. Now, the fact of the matter is, here in the state of Arizona, we have a constitutional mandate to provide a public school system that works for all of our kids, right? We are obviously failing at that because we are number 49th in the state, excuse me, in the country, 49th in the country. The fact of the matter is before my grandfather was very clear. He was a lumberjack, and he spent a lot of time in his yard gardening. And he said, you need to water your own yard first before you go out. You need to take care of your own house first before you go out. We need to fix the public school system that 95% of our kiddos go to, and make sure that that is a quality system before we start working on all these other systems that the majority of our kids do not go to. Having a failing public school system is bad for business. It's bad for parents, it's bad for the kids. And let me be clear, it's bad for business to have a public school system that is in the national news at being 49th in the country. So I say we need to adhere to our Constitution. I think that's extremely important. My mom was a school teacher. I was a school teacher. We need to address that first. And once we address that, then we can figure out other things we want to do. But it's paramount that we get a public school system where the kiddos can get to their house and to school without their school bus breaking down, where they can go to school and the roof's not leaking. Right now in the middle of this COVID, some kids got a hotspot. That's great. But guess what? There's no broadband and there's no internet anywhere near them. Okay. This is the problem. We have teachers that are not being paid. We have one-on-ones that are not being paid, and everybody else in between. We need to address the issue of education here in the state. We need to address the public school system here in the state. We need to adequately fund it.
Mm-hmm. Art, what is your independent problem solver solution to this crisis? I think Arizona has almost uniquely embraced charter schools as a solution to public school funding compared to other states. What's the argument? And Republicans will make this argument. What's the argument against just basically saying, well, we've thrown some money at it, outcomes haven't really improved, let's just embrace charters?
Yeah. So to me, we're asking the wrong question. We are absolutely asking the wrong question if that's how it gets posed. Arizonans have repeatedly said school choice and competition in the academic landscape, especially K through 12, is important. That is a different question than, is the landscape fair? Are the rules similar? And is the Arizona legislature picking the winners and losers in that landscape? Free and fair economic markets in a capitalist society function well when one person doesn't get the advantage over the next person, when there is a relational set of equity between the rules and you let people's hard work, creativity, and vision be what moves that market. Our academic school choice issues are no different. The difference is the Arizona legislature deals a deck with 33 cards to the public schools, and they deal a deck with 52 cards to the charter schools. My daughter, 11-year-old daughter, has been transformed in her life by amazing teachers in both the public school and charter school setting. That choice, that competition is good, but it is only good and it only produces good academic outcomes when it's fair. And year after year after year, the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the winners and the losers being picked by allowing single source contracting to charter schools, budget carry forwards. The rules and the statutes are really important because they decide who wins and who loses. As a legislator, and a business owner who operates in a capitalist fair market, those rules are important to me. Fairness is important to me, and it's going to be something that is just part and parcel of my mantra of how government should work, especially in an educational environment.
In other words, vouchers may be okay, but we need to have equitable accountability and transparency for both public and charter schools?
So the voucher issue is not the choice issue, because that's taxpayer issue. We're talking about taxpayer money, so the bucket has to be the same. The public was really clear on voucher expansion, and they overwhelmingly rejected. I worked for that because we were taking taxpayer dollars without any oversight of that dollars and shipping them off. That is a de facto defunding of public education. So you can't have adequate funding without adequate reform of the landscape. No, we should not be taking taxpayer money and using them for vouchers, period. That is a choice that those individual private educational institutions play by. Let them play in that realm if they'd like. Just don't use our money to defund public education and public charters with it.
Good. Speaking of defunding, I want to get one last policy question out of the way before we do closing statements and watch our lovely Senate debate. We have had a couple voters ask what your guys' thoughts are on the Black Lives Matter movement, and specifically calls to reallocate funding from some municipal, county, and state police departments towards other social services, colloquially called defunding the police. We'll start with Mayor Evans on this issue. Defunding the police or reallocating funding from the police. Good idea, bad idea, meaningless conversation that doesn't really matter if you're going to serve in the legislature? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, as a mother, right, I can totally understand the concept and the intent behind Black Lives Matter. As the mayor of the city of Flagstaff, I can tell you during our budget discussions in June, we actually increased police funding. I have had the opportunity to work directly with the U.S. Department of Justice Community Capacity Development Office in Washington, D.C., as well as the U.S. Attorney General's office in Phoenix and the Flagstaff Police Department for decades in the implementation and the delivery of community policing programs in hard-to-serve neighborhoods. I was the Weed and Seed site director, and I directly ran those programs. I think it's very important that we all understand that our law enforcement officers are simply asked to do too much. Our police are not only the first responders, but they're also social workers, mental health and substance abuse counselors, and their parents. These are not roles that we should have ever asked them to fulfill. And these are roles that society, as our representatives, were defunding things like mental health and substance abuse and increasing incarceration, that we step back and let happen. Here in the city of Flagstaff, we have taken an active role in making sure that our police officers are part of our community. And I am looking forward to getting down to Phoenix to have these conversations at a statewide level. For example, right now, our state representatives are starting to talk about body cameras. We've had body cameras in the city of Flagstaff on our police officers for about 6 years now, right? I think that there should be a statewide database regarding disciplinary actions. I think we should look at increasing the Arizona peace officer standards, right? We also need to talk about things like bail and bond reform. But I think it's very important for us to understand that community policing is paramount when it comes to a community and the relationship between the community and their police officers, and I refer to them as peace officers. I've had the opportunity to talk with Congressman Tom O'Halloran, who is a police officer, about this issue and about the funding that used to come from the Department of Justice that would allow cities and towns to actually do these types of activities. My organization, the Sunnyside Neighborhood Association, we started the first ever reentry program in Coconino County. A reentry program designed to make sure that when people are coming back to communities, they have the support that they need to make sure that they're successful. There are several things that we can do at the state level that could be very meaningful and very impactful to really help with this. Currently right now here in the state, we spend more money on our private prison system than we do our public university system. And we seem to be being reactive. What would happen if we were to change that and invest more in the citizens of Arizona rather than the corporations? I think you'd see a difference. So thank you for that question.
And now, Felicia, we'll turn that to you. Again, I'll just restate the question. Should municipal, state, et cetera, law enforcement have their budgets reduced in favor of funding social services, education, whatever other public programs?
Well, as far as, yes, I do believe that we should uh, take care of our community services like Mayor Evans said. But no, I absolutely do not believe we should defund the police department. Um, However, I want to make sure voters know that most police funding is actually managed at the city level. And one of my top priorities is to strengthen local control, as I've said, so that cities and counties should decide what's best locally for their community. So I look forward to working with our cities on this. And I do want to highlight the success that Mayor Coral Evans has had with her community policing program. But practically speaking, as a 32-year U.S. Army and Arizona National Guard veteran, I understand the importance of peacekeeping and the need to protect lives and property. In the Arizona National Guard, I was trained in how to avoid violent and lethal outcomes, and I was also responsible for teaching others, service members, mediation and de-escalation techniques. Look, today, our police face a difficult and dangerous job. Too often, they are asked to do much more than respond to crimes, much like our school teachers are in our schools. Police officers are put on the front lines to deal with the issues they aren't equipped or trained to handle. And that's why I support the need for police departments and the communities they serve to reprioritize the law enforcement budgets. For example, here in Arizona, de-escalation training is not currently required by law. It's only voluntary. We should ensure that we have the necessary funding to train all police officers on de-escalation techniques. That's simply a smart way to increase public safety. And as a nurse, I also want to point out that an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. So another way to increase public safety is to also fund clinical social workers to respond to those dealing with mental health issues. Asking our police officers to be first responders when dealing with someone with mental illness, or especially a veteran with PTSD, is both unfair and dangerous to everyone involved. So funding community programs that can tackle our current mental health and addiction crisis before they get out of hand is one proven way we can produce better outcomes.
Art, I'll now kick the question to you before we turn to closing statements.
Okay, I thought you were going to repeat the question. Okay, so no, I get the gist.
Yeah.
So I just want to say we do an absolutely terrible job in this country of thinking you can solve incredibly tough, complex problems with 2 and 3 and 4 word solutions. Yes, to increase training, yes, to increase mental health capacity, yes, to chemical dependency and alcoholism resources for folks, yes, to economic development, no, to defund the police. I mean, it is just a strategy that does not inherently relate to the outcome. We're trying to build safe communities, strong neighborhoods are the cornerstone of us being secure in our society. They're the cornerstone of us building strong economies. You can't just say categorically X equals Y. Last thing on this, because I know we're getting late here, is a 29-year veteran of the sheriff's office just retired, and he taught me one of the most important perspective pieces about law enforcement for Coconino County, second largest county in the continental United States. Any given Saturday night, you go through a Taco Bell drive-through. Jim, this one is for you. You go through a Taco Bell drive-through, and there are more people working at that Taco Bell drive-through than there are sheriff's officers on patrol across Coconino County. Defund the police does not serve that. People want more responsive, compassionate, caring, firm, and responsibility-driven community policing.
Great. Thanks, Art. All right, guys, we will now do closing statements. A reminder to keep those relatively brief, and we will get back to our alphabetical order. So, Art, I will you can keep the floor.
Okay, well, this has just been great. I really want to thank you. I want to thank Clean Elections and Felicia and Coral. Thanks for being here. It's really sad to me. We got 3 out of 6 candidates here. This is important. This is important that we take the risk to have conversations. If you like what our political system is producing, if you like the fact that we have built a box where 2 parties kind of go to their corner and too often, not all the time, but too often lob a bunch of grenades into the middle of that room and think that is solving the problems of Arizona, I am probably not your candidate. If you think that is producing good outcomes, I am probably not your person. But if you think we can do better, if you think you are willing to take some political risks with me to build an independent bridge over the partisan divide, let's do it. This has never been done in the history of the state of Arizona since 1912. We are going to break a glass ceiling, is my hope, on November 3rd. That needs to be broken. It needs to be broken because what we are doing is not working. I won't play politics as usual. I'm not going to play dysfunctional, hyper-partisan games. I'm going to remember you pay my salaries, and I'm going to work my ass off.
Great. Thanks, Art. Mayor Evans, closing statement, please.
Well, thank you very much for having us here tonight. Again, I'm a third-generation daughter of Arizona. My family's been here for 4 generations. I grew up in public housing. I got my first job when I was 13. I am very proud to be sitting in a house that my grandfather built in 1942. I own a small business, and I used to be a teacher. I care deeply about Northern Arizona and about the future of our children's children. Since I have been on the Flagstaff City Council serving in a nonpartisan capacity, I have been committed to assisting our small businesses grow and flourish, increasing the wealth of Arizona's working class families, addressing the issue of climate change, and looking after our veterans. My dad is an Air Force veteran. I believe in Arizona, and I love Arizona, and I'm very proud to say that I am an Arizonan. I want to thank all of you who are supporting my candidacy for LD6, and I want to ask you for your vote in this election on November 3rd. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And now Felicia French, one of 2 combat pilots running for her district. Please go ahead with your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank you again for hosting this or having us here, and all those that are out there listening. I thank you for taking your job seriously of being an informed voter. And I just wanted to remind you that I walked across this trail, the Arizona Trail, the entire length of our district, and I saw firsthand the effect of a 20-year drought. But I also got to meet so many people in our district and hear their stories firsthand. In 2018, I went to all the 36 towns in my district. That was before COVID-19, of course. And since March, we've talked to thousands of voters, and I know what the local issues are, and I know those are the problems I want to solve at the state legislature. So I want to end by sharing the following. I served our country for more than 3 decades. During that time, I worked alongside thousands of soldiers and civilians, and not once did I ever ask what party someone belonged to. All that mattered was we took care of each other, and we worked together, and we got the mission done. And that's the approach I will take at the state Senate as well. So to make sure we make America and Arizona better, not only for today's families, but our future generations as well. So thank you once again for listening to us, and Coral and Art for being here as well.
Great. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and the Senate debate, which I'm sure will be a blast. Have a nice one. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you.